as you have seen already, this Vedanta Congress is very unique in many respects. The panelists, they are not all philosophers. And of course, in the audience, there are people like me who are non-philosophers and many philosophers as well. So let me give you a little bit background. We have been discussing with philosophers for now many years, and what we found is one global fact is that the study of philosophy is in a bit of a danger throughout the world, not just Indian philosophy. When I talk with my colleagues, I am at the University of Massachusetts, so when I talk with my colleagues in the philosophy department at my university, they lament the fact that they have very few students and their existence. Balramji, please, on the day. कुर्सी है हमारी कुर्सी नहीं चाहिए. So philosophy in the United States is in big trouble. They have very few students, and the general flavor in academia now is that you provide students with the skills they need for good employment. So the original liberal arts principle that, well, you broaden your view by taking all kinds of courses, that is not the operating paradigm anymore. Now, when we come to Indian philosophy, I think, again, I'm a non-philosopher, I think the problem is more compounded. Why? Because we have heard already by many speakers, including our keynote speaker, Professor Arindam Chakravarti, on day one, that for a variety of reasons, Indian philosophy has been studied kind of based on the blueprint that was given to us by people from outside India. I mean philosophy as a regular academic discipline in an academic department in a university. And of course, we are constantly reminded that there is no equivalent term of philosophy. In our tradition, the term is darshan, and darshan is very different from philosophy. We have been told that again and again. But we have to face the fact that the way philosophy is taught is our way in which we produce philosophers. So we do have to look at academia. We cannot divorce our discussion from academia. So, because with this brief background, we have amongst us, okay, let me start from your right, my very left, Sindhu Podial from Tripura University. She, to her right is Shakuntala Bora. Shakuntala is from the Guwahati University. And then we have Professor Balram Singh from the Institute of Advanced Sciences. Then Professor Bala Ganpati Devarakonda from University of Delhi. And Professor Girish Jha from, well, kind of JNU, but right now he is deputed for some commission, but is basically a JNU person. And I will tell you up front that Balramji and Girish Jha, they are non-philosophers in this panel. So I would like them to give their initial remarks, maybe 5-6 minutes each, and then we would give a chance to each panelist to ask questions of others, and then we will open it up for general Q&A from the audience. But we do have a time limit of about an hour, so we have to finish by 4:15. So with that, let us begin to hear comments from our panelists. Let us start with Sindhu. Sindhu.
Okay, so shall I Thank you so much, Professor. Good afternoon, everyone. I was expecting I will be the last one, so I don't have to speak much. But then somehow it came first to me. And then I'll start with this post-humanist departure. So all of us, we know that we live in a post-human world. AI is one of the post-human departure that we talk about. But I'm not going to talk about AI, but I'm going to talk about that what is this post-human departure that we can also look from an Indian perspective and also from a purely Indian perspective, because Indian philosophy, when we talk of Indian philosophy, it is one of the accusations was that it is too spiritual. One of the criticisms we have read in criticism, but and we considered it as a criticism. We never considered it to be one of the tool to develop it further and consider it one of the as one of the assets for the Indian philosophy. So in that light, this is something I have been working past 4-5 years on the post-human departure. So can we consider this intuitive experience? We can also call it as a Brahmanubhuti, or even that experience. Let us not talk about Brahmanubhuti as such in a very lame way, but that experience that which is moving beyond this limited understanding of being human. By when I say being human, I am taking this being human in a modernist, humanist, pure humanist perspective. So that has been departed now. And within that departure, when we talk of cultural post-humanism, when we talk of transhumanism, and when we talk of religious post-humanism, when we talk of literary post-humanism, in that same fashion, we can also think of incorporating this, experiences which are purely subjective experiences. We can also do something in that regard, and this would be a post-human departure, and this is the premise that I am now going to present today. Now how to go about it is a question, because experimental philosophy, that is something which normally don't do in the classrooms. So in the classrooms what we do is to teach and then get away with it. There is Brahman, and then Ekam Sat, Bahuda Vadanti, all those things we say. But then what is that Ekam? We have never tried to experimentally prove. It is not unprovable also, it is anarvachaniyam also. So in that case, what are the mechanisms through which we can also make these things relevant, so that theoretically we can talk of the post-human departure in theories, and at the same time there is also a consensus where we can bring this practical implementation of that also into the classrooms. So I invite all those, especially the Gurujis, Maharaj from the Advaitic Ashram, or even RamKrishna, RamKrishna Mission, or ISKCON, or any other spiritual disciplines. If that aspect of it also can bring into the classrooms, so the skill which is missing in philosophy, that can also be incorporated there. But otherwise, when we talk of the skill-oriented things in philosophy, it has taken over by this glamorized yoga, so which I do not buy actually. So in that respect, another domain that I am always, it's a very promising one, but then I know it's a utopian one as well, and nobody will agree to this. I think 50% of will disagree and criticize me on this. Also to bring out Tantra as one of the modes of it, because Tantra is also something which is uniquely Indian, and then we have not focused and brought back that into the domain of teaching, and that can also, I can just propose that, because I am not a practitioner of Tantra. I really don't know, I am an ignorant in that. I am also an ignorant person equally there in this experience of all these Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana, that tradition also. I am purely from a phenomenological background. However, little bit of love that I have for Vedanta philosophy, which brings me constantly back to Vedanta. And then these are the two propositions, or rather three propositions, with which I want to present in front of you as the post-human departure, with the hope for the future of Indian philosophy. Thank you so much. I hope I have not taken much time.
Please, go ahead.
A very good afternoon. I will be actually referring to certain issues. I do not know whether they are problems or they are the characteristic features of Indian philosophy. But what I see is that to envisage a future of Indian philosophy, first we have to understand what are the characteristics that make Indian philosophy. And for that I am choosing to find out, according to me, which are the features that have remained constant. That is Upanishads, Mahabharata, Shankara, Nagarjuna, Vasubandhu for the classical schools, and among the contemporary Krishnamurti. So that from the past to the present, what we call Indian philosophy. First, what I see is that in India, philosophy is not for the sheer pleasure of doing philosophy. It has an end, and the end is either happiness or it is a freedom from distress with the help of knowledge. So the goal remains knowledge, which will lead us to happiness. And now when we look at what sort of knowledge we are looking at through philosophy, the term Darshana Shastra definitely indicates, and as Professor Sengupta has said, it is often told to us that it is a seeing. So the knowledge we are looking at through philosophy is an act. It is not a knowledge which can be kept in the mind, which is not an information, but it is an activity which is supposed to happen. And in that activity, what I have seen through the Upanishads, through Krishnamurti, is that it is seeing, but in a different way, and that is without any mediation. And in the Upanishads, we find that the cow and the horse, I do not call it so, the realized person says. In Mahabharata also, we find the same thing, that I don't consider the body to be mine. And Shankara would say that the world is no more world, it is Maya now. And Nagarjuna would say thing is not a thing anymore, it is shunya, it is illusion now. Vasubandhu would say that it is now upachara, it is a metaphor, and Krishnamurti will say that self is an illusion. So the perspective has changed. What we consider as a thing is no more a thing now. It has totally changed for us. So that is the sort of knowing, it seems, that Indian philosophy is aiming towards. That is the goal. And regarding the bliss, it is in this very activity of knowing that liberation actually happens, whether we consider it to be a bliss or we consider it to be a freedom from distress. So the activity releases us, and when that activity becomes an ability, that is what is called actually liberation. That is what I have found. And definitely my perspective will be limited because I am taking only certain texts and certain philosophers. And another thing I have noticed is that desires and hopes are not regarded as something which helps us in realizing this knowing or coming to this activity or to this ability. And the reason must be that it desires and the hopes give us perspectives. And it is a perspective which is supposed to be given up because it is supposed to be unmediated. So there are certain consequences of considering philosophical knowledge, that is the knowledge that we come to as an activity. That is, we are, in Indian philosophy, the knowledge about is not what is looked for. It is not a knowledge about. It is the very activity of knowing, When we look at the Upanishads, it is said that when Narada went to Sanat Kumara, then Narada had the knowledge of Vedangas and others. And yet he said that I do not have knowledge. So it is not the knowledge about. Knowledge about is rejected. And we see Shankara, we see Nagarjuna, we see Vasubandhu, and in the present time we see Krishnamurti saying knowledge has to be given up. It is the knowledge about which has to be given up. Because as long as we have knowledge about, the activity of knowing, the unmediated knowing doesn't happen. And this brings me to the issues actually which I feel that are there. First is that medium is to be given up. In Indian philosophy, the knowing that we are looking for, the medium is to be given up. Then what do we do with the mediums? If the very mediums is what is asked for to be given up. And the second issue is that I see it happening, and that is the philosophical thoughts or the text or the thoughts of a thinker are getting applied. But if it is getting applied to fulfill our desires, and if it is getting applied to come to a certain success, a desired success, whether we will still call it a philosophical knowledge, because it is supposed to be the act of seeing. It is not supposed to fulfill my desire. So these are issues I have found with Indian philosophy. They are also the characteristic, and they may also turn out to be the problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Sengupta, for calling us We Are Not Philosophers, even though we both have Doctor of Philosophy degrees. Interesting, isn't it? But I think what he meant to say is we are not Indian philosophers, because I have a Doctor of Philosophy degree, but Indian philosophy is very different. The first thing we should start with the translation. What is philosophia? Phile means love. Sophia, sometimes people call wisdom. I'll take that definition. I love to be wise. But actually, I checked the Hindi dictionary. It says, Kamil Bulke, those of you who have, it says, Sophia means Tark and Kutark. So I think we can be avoiding that. That's not needed. So I think darshan is better. But if you want to have Tark, I think Nyayas do all kind of Tark. But most important thing to me is the concept of, when I was in primary school, Asato ma sadgamay, tamaso ma jyotirgamay, then only mrityor ma mritam gamay. Tamaso is very important, darkness. We should look for darkness. Why? I do have a chemistry training. So in chemistry we have, and physics, there is a dark energy. 95.5% of this universe is dark energy. And that is the basis of rest. That is Sesnag. That's my name, by the way, Balram. It says Nag, so I kind of use that. I am a dark energy, which means you can find almost anything there. And that is the kind of Indian philosophy that might be. Tamso ma jyotirgamay. Who are tas tamso ma? I'm not that dark. I mean, my fair color also not that dark. But I can be source of darkness, which means questions, which is what really drives me to work with Vedanta. What is that darkness? Or believe it or not, students, I know they won't like it. They are totally ignorant people. And the only problem with Indian education system is that they are being trained. They are being like smart, go answer this question, answer that question, and JNU accepts them. We should be taking the dumbest people like me. The guy has questions, doesn't know any answers. That is what is the basis of Upanishads, which is what Arindam Chakravarti was talking about. That's one of the Vedāntic elements is Upanishad. And Upanishad, if you have all the smart people will just argue. But if you have people who are, when I say dark, means they are curious. They don't know. If you know everything, then you don't need to come to university. But if you are a student who is curious, that means you are already acknowledged that you don't know. And that's the darkness you are looking for. That is the system that India has had of the education. The key is the education. If we can bring education, practice Indian philosophy. We are those of us privileged to sit on this side and say we teach a class or something, or somebody is ignorant enough or curious enough to come to us and asking some questions. That is a privileged position. And that is the system that needs to be created. But that system cannot be run by government. Government can never, if they are giving you salary, they'll tell you what to do. The teachers have to create their own system. Tell me if one Gurukul was charging tuition fee. I will believe you. Otherwise, we need to create a system of education for Indian philosophy, our own Gurukul system. None of us will be taking salaries. Then you know how strong you are in your mission and your vision. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to the chair and also to the organizers for this opportunity. The theme is Future of Indian Philosophy. The point is, even I don't know what is my future. How can I talk about the future of a discipline? Okay, but we are supposed to talk about that. If at all, if I have to talk about future of Indian philosophy, then I should know at least what is Indian philosophy. How do we characterize Indian philosophy? Is a troubling kind of one, because do we consider it to be Indian philosophy or Indian philosophies, plural in nature? Also, with reference to what are we talking about Indian philosophy? Because when we talk about Indian philosophy as a geographical mark or some mark that we are attributing, probably we are doing it with reference to something else. Okay, which means we are defining ourselves in terms of the other. So is that the way that we are looking at Indian philosophy when we are talking about future of Indian philosophy? Is a very troubling kind of one. And initially, like Krishna, people have looked at Indian philosophy and argued that it is not a monolithic structure. It is much wider kind of systems that has developed. So even that poses a serious problem to talk about the future of Indian philosophy as such. Okay, let me go to the second interesting thing that I have. It's like I'm just proposing this. Epistemologies determine metaphysics. Your epistemology determines your metaphysics. So if the ways of knowing determine what is reality for us, so what are our ways of knowing Indian philosophy that are determining our reality of Indian philosophy is important, right? Because as Krishna, again I'm quoting Krishna, doing Indian philosophy in English, he said, is like doing more harm to Indian philosophy. Okay, so the way we are looking at Indian philosophy also is a troubling kind of one in this context. Of course, there were contestations of his statement in the form of Nalini Bhushan and Garfield coming out with a book. But keeping that aside, my concern here is what are the ways of knowing Indian philosophy? Unfortunately, we think that academic way of knowing Indian philosophy is the only kind of Indian philosophy. This is a complete reductionist approach with which we are approaching Indian philosophy, and probably that is how we have to talk about the future of Indian philosophy. Because if we consider Indian philosophy to be something that is being done only in the universities and colleges by the academia, then we have a very wrong conception of Indian philosophy, and that is how it is required that we should look at other avenues, other possibilities, other spaces where Indian philosophy is being richly contributed, and then talk about in an inclusive manner about Indian philosophy. And that is the way we should look forward. That's where I make this distinction between academic and non-academic, academic and public. And we often think that public doesn't contribute to philosophy, unfortunately. Now public epistemologies are empty of philosophy because academicians have made it their own prerogative And now it is our turn to get back to the society and make it visible in the public epistemology so that they would warn us, and that is how future of Indian philosophy or future of any philosophy can be made a significant one. This is where I would stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Kalyanji. Thank you, Balramji, and all the other panelists. Thank you, organizers, for giving me the opportunity. See, we are in 27th International Congress of Vedanta, and we came to JNU in India 2011. There was the 20th International Congress of Vedanta. Why did we do that? We wanted to liberate Vedanta. We want to make Vedanta reaches, make sure Vedanta reaches to people, more people, right? From a limited gathering congregation in the United States to India, where a lot more people participate in it. That's the bottom line I'm going to talk about. We have to make sure Vedanta is accessible by more people. Indian philosophy is essentially pluralistic. We have heterodox and orthodox kind of traditions in Indian philosophy. So we need to make sure it reaches out to more people. And most of the texts of Indian philosophy actually are in Sanskrit. And then the Sanskrit texts have to be accessible to most people. And the problem is not everybody is able to read. Even if the texts are with you, you'll not be able to read it. Because there'll be Sutraik Parampara. The Sutraik Parampara, the sutras have to be expanded, Vritti, Vyakhya, and Bhashyas. And all of that, we don't have experts actually who can actually read out these texts and make the Vrittis. Very limited number of people who can actually do it in their own discipline. And Nayayika cannot be expected to understand a text of grammar. Even if he does so, he'll try to make it something different. So there are watertight compartments of schools of philosophy in India. We need to make sure they interact more on such platforms. Therefore, these platforms must be open to more and more people. And to do that, since the texts are in Sanskrit, those texts have to be made accessible. And we cannot do it humanly, because the technology has to be leveraged to make sure the texts are accessible. How can we do it? First, the primary texts of all these schools of philosophy in India have to be available in the search mode with you, in your mobile phone, on internet, and with kind of bootstrapping with the dictionaries and glossaries that you can use to make sure right vrittis are done. Right? And afterwards, people who cannot read and write, even they need to access the text. Philosophy is everybody, Philosophy was not a discipline in India. छह वेदांग में दर्शन नहीं था. दर्शन सारे विषयों में रहता है, सारे विषय दर्शन में रहते हैं. So darshan is kind of something's undercurrent. It goes in every discipline. So we have to make philosophy in India multidisciplinary. And number one would be to make sure all the texts available so that more people are able to read, understand Indian philosophy. All the Upanishads, all the other. We have a lot of these texts available on our server in JNU. I have 5 servers: Parani, Patanjali, Katyayan, Bhatriyadi, Nagesh, all the Vayyakarnas. The servers are named on them. You can search sanskrit.jnu.ac.in. You'll get many of these texts available. Now I'm coming back from a deputation from Government of India to JNU in this May. I'm ending my deputation to GOI. Then I'll be kind of speeding up more work actually to getting more texts online in the server format. Now even if the texts are there, they have to be readable. So there's Sandhi Samas. All these have to be Vigraha done, Vicheda done, and then Vrittis done nicely, and the relevant Nighantus are to be bootstrapped. If I'm interpreting a text of Vedanta, the relevant dictionaries have to be bootstrapped. You will not be interpreting Vedanta with Apta's dictionary, right? So you have to make sure relevant dictionaries, glossaries, have to be there. So all these things have to be there. And people who can't read and write, for them audio, video formats of the text have to be there. For children, the stories, animated stories, have to be made accessible to children in the gaming format so that everybody is on board. That's the first aspect. The second aspect, which I think I've been working on a little more, is the applying Vedanta for AI. Someone mentioned AI there, because we are in the age of AI. And AI is able to answer queries to Indian situations, but they are not able to, Srinivaji, but they are not able to solve problems of India. Why? Because we are actually retraining the foreign algorithms with Indian data, so they retain the previous samskaras and they are able to answer questions but not solve problems of India. So we need to make sure the AI systems are based on indigenous algorithm, indigenous data. And when we talk about indigenous data, the Shabda comes to my mind, the AI Shabda, which is considered weaker, Pramana. So we have to have Indian data. We were discussing with Rajiv Malhotra ji that can we have a Sanskrit LLM, large language model? What would be that? So I was doing a rough count of how many Sanskrit words can we have if we train an LLM with Sanskrit words completely. We are not having even a 2 billion words in Sanskrit. To start from the Rig Veda down to modern times, you can't get 2 billion words. So you have to get a lot of synthesized words. You have to use the grammar principles. 2000 dhatus are there, 21 prefixes are there, suffixes are there. You run algorithms and construct words. So you construct a lot of words and then you can put them all together. You can get more than 2 billion. Then you can train an LLM. The advantage of training an AI system with Sanskrit data would be that would be originally Indian. My father, he does not see English news, English news or English news, read English newspapers. He says, I'll be corrupted. You have to have your own system. Imagine a student who has not read anything from the Macaulay's curricula, only the ashrama student. He will be originally Indian. That's my understanding. Now, if we train an LLM with this data, you can understand that there will be something originally Indian, and then that LLM can spawn language A, language B, language C, language D. Then we can have something, an original AI system which can answer queries as well as solve problems of India. Third, we have to spread Vedanta globally. See, in India, Indian philosophy is there in everybody, and even an Indian farmer who is not educated believes and practices Indian philosophy. By taking good care of his family, he's doing karma, and he's a really practitioner of Indian philosophy. But the global audience needs Indian philosophy. The global situation, the titling of this seminar, is very appropriate. The world is suffering from wars, problems, and situations like that. So we need to help them out. How can Indian philosophy reach out to the world and help them? For that, we have to make sure the philosophy reaches out globally. And in America, Balramji, remember we did a school teachers a training where we taught Indian philosophy to the teachers of the schools in America. So something like that has to be there. The Western scholarship has to be influenced, either bought over or influenced, so that they can speak about Indian philosophy, talk about Indian philosophy, and then obviously we have to make available all the knowledge texts of India globally. Certainly, there are many libraries. The Clay Library is very famous. They are selling Indian texts translated, and people are buying Indian texts translated. They're reading Clay's Library Sanskrit texts online. So there's a lot of market potential also. We have to make sure our text reach out to the global audience, and also the lectures also have to be broadcast to the global audience. So we have to do a lot of these concrete steps to make sure philosophy is liberated and philosophy reaches out to everybody in India and the world. Thank you so much.
So now I give the panelists a chance to ask questions of each other. Whoever wants to go first.
Sir, this is a question to Professor Bala, sir, and to Professor Jha. So the question will be how many of the stakeholders we're gonna get? That's the biggest question, because not everyone will be interested. And the world, the way we are going towards, these material understanding, are we still be interested in doing that? Or are the generation which is coming now, are they going to be interested in that? Even if we give them in terms of cartoons and other things. Because I have seen a couple of kids in my own home, after looking at 2-3 minutes, they are also not interested in watching the same cartoon over and over again. So will that be fruitful, for bringing out the resurgence that we are talking about with terms of Vedanta? So, and then shall I wait? Okay. So again the same question will be like, if we go and talk to the public and talk about philosophy, the very first question which I get, so I try to practice philosophy and then I go there, maybe I am too theoretical for them, so they say tumhari philosophy band karo, we are not interested in this. So that's the thing. If I talk about ahimsa, or if I talk about violence and other things, we are basically violence, but then we need to be non-violent. If I say that tumhari philosophy band karo, this is a completely different situation than what you anticipated or what you are theorizing. So these things are going to come, but then I am really very, very interested in that, because I really believe in that dialogical method and Socrates' method, that philosophy needs to go to each and everyone, so that it revives. Everybody starts thinking before acting. And thank you so much.
Can I quickly answer? Yeah. Thank you. The answer is what I call storytelling technique. Not if you bombard everybody with philosophy, people will run away. So the strategy in India, even the mathematics was a song, right? Every text is a song. You can sing Panini, whole of Panini in 2 hours, and you remember songs. You don't remember the dialogues like that. Now, Panchatantra pedagogy, we did an animation of Panchatantra Hitobesha Jataka, about 25 stories. And I was in a situation where I needed sketches, original sketches. So we did a competition of school kids. I only informed some South Delhi schools. The kids, please come, we'll do a sketching competition. Some of the word spread and we had a huge problem of plenty. Many kids coming in, we didn't know how to filter them out. So a lot of interest, let me tell you. And the sketches that they did, we are using them for animation. So I would say, please go indirectly, and then not basically, philosophy is there in everything, every discipline in India. So we have to be slightly more careful in, I would say, reformulating our pedagogical practices in India.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, it's the problem of all of us. But there are two important things to be noted here. Number one is, one of the reasons why people think stop your philosophy, people say stop your philosophy, is their conception of philosophy itself is very troubling. Okay, so you are supposed to address their epistemologies. So how do you address their epistemologies? If you bring your own epistemology, in the sense that you have been or we have been teachers, so we think that we have to teach them. We have to tell them what is philosophy or how do you look at things. This is a wrong kind of conception. Actually, you don't begin with you begin with them. Especially when we do public philosophy, I don't go there and start talking what is good to them. If I do that, I'll be thrown out immediately, right? So it's like we bring, even Socrates you quoted, Socrates never started with his own what he wants to say. He would elicit things from the people, and then on the basis of people's interest, he would pick up some concept and make them talk about it, and then make them realize that their own understanding of the concept is probably misplaced, so that they can move forward in their journey, intellectual journey. So this is what public philosophy is all about. In fact, Kshipra is here, and philosophical cafes are oriented towards that particular aspect, where we interact with the public, whoever comes there, and encourage them to come with a concept or keep a general concept there for their understanding, where each one of us, along with them, it is your journey as well. Each one of us have an improved understanding of the same concept at the end of the day when we are leaving the place. It's not you teaching them. So our own approach has to be completely different. I have a troubling question. Actually, since we are all talking about philosophy and future of Indian philosophy, is there any philosophical community in India? Is there any philosophical community in India that we can talk about? Okay, this is the biggest question to me, because again, when we talk about philosophical community in India, we reduce it to academic philosophical community. What about ISKCON, which is contributing? What about RamKrishna Ashram, which is contributing? What about Aurobindo Ashram, which is contributing? What about n number of non-academic spaces which are richly contributing to philosophy in India? And we think that we are blissfully happy to say that we are only limiting ourselves to philosophical community with regard to academia. This is a major problem that we have to seriously address, and that's what makes us to reach out to the general public, and that's what helps us to look at future of Indian philosophy in a better way. Thank you.
I somehow feel the way Indian philosophy should be addressed is by seva. I just mentioned ISKCON and few. I've never found anybody who has refused my seva. They all are very happy to get seva. और नहीं और कुछ मिलता तो पैर ही हमारे गुरु जी का पैर दबाते थे, बड़ा अच्छा लगता था उनको. मतलब whatever we have, I'm trying to say, सेवा करना is a philosophy, practical. वो I think you're right. अगर if आपको भूख लगी हो और मैं एक रेसिपी पढ़ूँ, पूरा गिरीश जी के पूरे कारपोरा में रेसिपी डाल दूँ, आपको भूख लगे इनकी ये रेसिपी पढ़ लीजिए, कि बड़े परेशान हो जाएंगे लोग. तो इसलिए जब हम कुछ करते हैं, करके दिखाते हैं सेवा के भाव से, दैट विल बी द इंडियन फिलॉसफी. अगर उसको हम, तो यू राइट, एकेडमिक वर्ल्ड इज गोइंग टू बी ए प्रॉब्लम, बिकॉज एकेडमिक वर्ल्ड इज, हमारे तो गुरुकुल होता था, वहाँ गुरु जी के यहाँ जाते थे, गुरु माता खाना भी खिला देती थी, फिर आपको सारा काम करना पड़ता, झाड़ू वाड़ू सब लगाना पड़ता था. दिस हैपेंड इवन व्हेन आई वाज इन प्राइमरी स्कूल. वी यूज्ड टू डू मिडिल स्कूल ऑल्सो. मेरे गुरुजी बिना पैसा लिए सारा रात को बुला के पढ़ाते थे, डांटते भी पीटते भी थे, किसी को बुरा नहीं लगता था. लेकिन अब ट्यूशन शुरू हो गया है, अब गुरुजी ट्यूशन करते हैं तो गुरुजी की इज्जत नहीं रह गई. आई मीन वी नीड टू बी गुड फिलोसफर्स एज ए प्रैक्टिशनर्स. I come from a joint family. My auntie, Chachi, she is 82-year-old. Aparna has been there and Anuja has been there. What a great philosopher. कुछ भी problem ही नहीं है, because he has so much experience to share. एक हमसे बड़े वाले भाई हैं, आज तक उन्होंने जिंदगी में शिकायत किया ही नहीं. इन्होंने शिकायत किया ही नहीं है. So I know since childhood, उनका अगर अंडरवियर फटा हुआ तो कभी किसी से नहीं बोलते, अपना काम करते रहते थे. These are the philosophers to learn from. मैं उनका पैर छूता हूँ. He is 4th grade पास, और वो 4th grade भी मेरी नकल करके पास होते थे, लेकिन उनकी फिलॉसफी इतनी ग्रेट है कि मैं सच में उनको प्रणाम करता हूँ. So Shakuntala is a name that has solved a lot of problems in this country.
Thank you, sir. One of the query that I have is Professor Balaganapati, and because he was referring to the Krishna and about language, because if we, my issue is about that if we confine it to only Sanskrit, there's going to be problem, because of what Professor Chai has said just contradicts what you have said. And the other thing is that in Western philosophy, which has become so popular, we don't do Kant in German, nor do we do Sartre in French. We don't do any of the Western philosophy in their own language, as continental philosophy is done in English. But they haven't lost the flavor. At least to enter, we are using English. Kant, Heidegger, Husserl, Levinas, Sartre. In what language are we doing? We are doing in English. So why can't we do Indian philosophy in English? Otherwise, I feel there is going to be the very issue of making it available. And to Professor Jha, I think the stories have already become part of what you were saying about that philosophy is a part of the common life, of everyday life, of every Indian, because Puranas have made it available. But there is also the issue of making pure philosophy available through the stories, and I think that is why sutras originated, and that is why I feel the scholastic or the schools originated, to keep it again in a way pure, at least for some people. Because what I see is how I see, that is the very symbol of Kali is the symbol of Kal. And we see that Shiva is lying underneath her feet is because Kal can never reach reality, or Kal stops when reality is. But how many of us have looked into the truth of that story? We worship Kali as an idol. We have forgotten about the truth that the symbol represents or the story represents. So what do you say about making truth available through the stories?
Well, there are two kinds of approaches that we do in Indian tradition. One is the constructing error-free text using right methods of Tantra Yukti, and also be able to get the pure meaning, I call it unambiguous meaning from the text using the same method of Tantra Yukti, Shabda-Bodha. Now, the fact that most of our texts, I'm talking about Sanskrit, Pali, Prakrit, Abhabhansha, early Indian languages also, poetry form, right? In fact, many manuscript libraries the world over are celebrating Indian texts. They understand, they think that it's Devanagari Sanskrit, but they are not Sanskrit. I've been to the Vanpert Library, University of Pennsylvania. Most of the texts are not Sanskrit, even the actual Rajasthani language, So a lot of languages have been used, not only Sanskrit, obviously. Now the problem is when you have poetic, a text, leaves a lot of room for interpretation. And interpretations will happen. Therefore, we have Vad and Paramparas in India. And we are happy, having multiple interpretations. But in a certain discipline, you have to have one interpretation, and then you Shastrartha. In Shastrartha, you prove or disprove. My interpretation, your interpretation, whatever it means. So that has been the tradition in India. But the problem is if you have to make sure everybody understands philosophy, you have to go their way. You have to approach people first. People first through simpler methods, stories, dialogues, etc., etc. And then, you engage with them, and then discussions happen, interpretations happen, some intellectual discourse will happen. And that's how we have to, go. Bottom up is the approach. If you go top down, it's not going to work in India. Bottom, we have to go to the people first, people's philosophy. And therefore, we have to make sure texts are available to them in all the formats. Mobile, internet, all the formats, text, video, etc., so that people are able to access their texts. See, whatever the texts are there in philosophy, they are descriptive tradition. We were not prescriptive. We described whatever was happening in India to the people. Now, these texts are documented, but people now may not be knowing these texts. So make sure texts are reaching out to them. We have to make sure texts are available all across.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shakuntalaji. In fact, whatever Professor Girishnath ji has said and what I said is not contradictory. I was carefully listening to him because he was not emphasizing the point of translations. He was only emphasizing the point that dictionaries and glossaries must be available everywhere so that you can have a better access to the text. Is that what, did I get it correctly?
Translation is of course part of it.
Yeah, but translation would come later. But I was closely listening to you. You did not use about that, talk about that. Yeah, coming back to my point, the spirit of what Krishna has said is also one of the concerns of my classroom. Whenever I teach Indian philosophy in English, I tell my students that I am already distorting 50% of its meaning. And 20% more may go in the communication. And we don't know how much finally is reaching out to you. But if there is an opportunity of reading its translation in your own language, mother tongue, Indian language, you will have a better access to the text than reading an English translation. Okay? I'm saying this because when I said this, somebody got really hurt. An Aurobindo scholar, he said, "Are you saying that Aurobindo's translation of Gita is not appropriate?" I said, "No, I don't mean that. Aurobindo has an experienced soul and he has written something with his own experience. I don't have that experience, so I will not be able to read it in the similar way that Aurobindo has written." So that is how the language, see, there are two culturally loaded languages, Sanskrit and English. And if one culturally loaded language is try to understand the other culturally loaded language, try to do the similar kind of thing, reversing it, like trying to understand English with Sanskrit, you would understand the difficulty. So that is my major concern. That's why I say that going to one's own, Indian language, getting into the text through Indian language is always better. Otherwise, translation and then the translation would always distort it. Since you quoted about the Greek philosophy, etc., nobody would consider you to be a great Aristotelian unless you know Greek. Okay? That's an established fact. Now, in Indian universities, unfortunately, students are encouraged to do Indian philosophy without knowing Sanskrit, which is a very pathetic situation. If we are looking at the future of Indian philosophy, it should be made compulsory that all the students who do research in classical Indian philosophy must be made to study at least third level of Sanskrit course compulsory. That is important for us. Unfortunately, we are not doing it. And this is what would build the foundation for the next future of Indian philosophy that we are talking about. I'll stop it here. Thank you.
So we have very little time, but
Sir,
I do want to give you a chance to ask questions of our panelists, but please keep it as a question, and if you can identify the panelist, that will be so much better. Short question to
philosophy to class. Brahman is not a dog or cat over which there is no ambiguity. Brahman is consciousness. That you have to say in scientific terms. Then, madam, you, through the mind, we have to transcend the mind, and therefore, language can talk only about dravya, guna, karma, sangya, sambandha. The truth of philosophy is beyond all these categories. And you, sir, this philosophy, the teachers and the commitment of philosophy, are important. Just one line on each. One line on each. Yeah, I'll just complete it.
I have got a question to Indian philosophy, is that it's aim oriented. We are not just doing it, that we have to reach somewhere, and she meant that we have to reach in such a way that the nature of this perception, it's kind of a sort of a direct perception into the nature of reality itself. She made reference to Krishnamurti. And the nature of this perception is such that it is quite literally throwing away everything that has brought you up to the point, basically. Now, my question in this will be, and it's a pretty personal question, what is the value of the philosophy after you reach to that point? I mean, whatever you have learned, or the philosophization, the method that you have gone through, after you reach to the point or acquire what a sort of a direct perceptions of sorts in reality, then is it still relevant, or does it open towards something completely different from that which has taken you to the point?
Yes. Once you reach that state, then the leather is no more needed. That is the answer.
But in this case, the leather is Indian philosophy.
Yes. Only for the person who has realized the leather is not needed, but for the people who are still looking to where we are supposed to reach, philosophy has its utility. Thank you.
Sir, any other questions? Again, please keep it short.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Nepal. I think you are respected people, are talking about the Indian philosophy. I'll have a questions to Professor Balaram or something like that. Yeah. So the philosophy, Indian philosophy, is not limited to only India. It is connected to across the border. So I think Indian philosophy is not possible with Nepalese philosophy too. That means, so I think you need to correct that. This is South Indian philosophy, because that should be universal and global. That is my expectation. So Professor Balaram sir was talking about the kind of this thing. So I think language is very, very important aspect of the philosophy. If there is a matter of language death, because there is a situation about the language death, particularly in my country, regarding the Sanskrit education, we are talking about the philosophy in different areas, because that you are respecting your uncles like that you are talking to, because there are a lot of philosophies like kitchen philosophy, driving philosophy, even my mother philosophy, father philosophy, marriage philosophy. So how could you connect the philosophy, multiple philosophy, that means multidisciplinary philosophies, to to the language, to the philosophy that we are talking globally. So, for example, philosophy.
I think I got it.
Yeah. So, would you please clarify the relationship between philosophy and other dimensions of society, culture, tradition, history, even law, even artificial intelligence? Please, with the examples.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I don't think I will have that much time Professor Gupta will give me, but I think it is the idea is communication, not the language that we are talking about here. Language is not an important thing, it's the communication. And the communication can be in any aspect of life, cultural, musical, politics, whatever you want to call that, the communication. And then I normally take a refuge in my science. I work with Botox, and they have found those people who have Botox, they look very nice, but they cannot communicate. The communication is not by words. No, this is published research. Communication, not only that if you get Botox, you cannot express your facial expression, you can also not understand. And this is where I learned. For you to learn what I'm saying, even words, and you can see my hands gesturing, but there is subtle expression on my face. Unless you can copy that, you will not understand. And this is true for not only expression that I'm trying to communicate, but what I try to do. I just mentioned about my family. Many of you probably just got some communication that I have a joint family, and there is brother who is even 4th grade pras, but he is still respected. It's a communication. You just got that communication by this. I don't need to explain the whole word. So action, Indian philosophy to me, when I say Indian, I don't mean Indian territorial. India is a concept. I talked about it yesterday. The whole world, according to genetics, not language, I don't know that much about language. According to genetics, the whole world has come from South India to the entire world based on genetics 65,000 years ago. So that human culture, human experience, how you communicate is the key. And that right now we are communicating, I live in Boston, we are communicating with food. Indian food masala is very, very popular everywhere. Now yoga, we talked about yoga. We are not talking about yoga as a philosophy, but yoga as a practice. But when you practice yoga, you and I feel the same way. And that is how we can communicate. If Indian philosophy, again, Indian quote unquote, that philosophy that we are all talking about, if we started practicing, the whole world will reverberate that idea. And I think that's the kind of Indian philosophy initiative we need to take, especially with young people. And I heard that there was some focus on women. I really, really honestly believe, I don't mean that I respect and revere every woman on this earth, but women in general are the beholders of this. If they take responsibility, nobody can stop them. And that's why they are called Devis. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question to Mr. Jha, sir. That you have said there would be a storytelling method to make the Indian philosophy more public, but my question is that whether if we accept the storytelling method to public Indian philosophy much more, then would it be would it be a deviation from the truth and validity of our critical consideration? And second question is to the dais, to all of the dais, that Indian philosophy has an adhikari vichara of its own. So would it be wise to make the Indian philosophy much more public and accessible to everybody? Thank you.
But if you start with technical methodology or jargon, people get disinterested. If you are able to communicate through indirect means of communication, stories are one of them. Panchatantra, Jataka, etc. They have a wonderful pedagogy. They're not talking about the ideas straightforward, but indirectly. and then they get the message. This is how Indian dialogue has been. All the Puranas, etc., all the storytelling happens that way. And that is the basic idea. Now, if you do this, then philosophy will be more popular, more public, and it is public, where you have to basically do dialogue and make sure philosophy is understood well. And the traditional classroom methodology that we have today is Macaulay. And Macaulay methodology, I don't know, the curricula, etc. We study a lot of things in philosophy in our curricula. We don't practice them outside. We don't need them outside. The whole of JNU is very different. Munirka is Munirka. We don't get to see what JNU studies being practiced in Munirka. So make sure whatever you study is people are able to use it. People are able to use it. That's the whole thing.
Any philosopher faculty want to tackle that other question?
So making philosophy public, that's what was your question, right? So sir, I think, had already spoken about it, and it was a more convincing answer that he gave. So it is because I also believe that it is because we made philosophy as a discipline and to be taught only inside the class, and also we did not start teaching philosophy from the very nursery classroom, because it was believed that philosophy is something very sophisticated and it has to be learned only after a certain age. However, this argument I always offer: if a child can learn 2 plus 2 equal to 4, where nothing in the world is 2 plus 2 equal to 4, then why not philosophy? Why not what I am? Or why not what my emotions are? If I am crying, because child learns to, nobody taught him or her to cry. It cries, it laughs. If it feels hungry, it tries to grab something and eat. Doesn't matter it's a food or non-eatable substance. Or if it wants to learn something, when it tries to have an acquaintance with the world, it tries to touch around and learn things. So why can't we teach philosophy from the nursery classroom? Maybe that approach will also save philosophy from the kind of other that we have created for philosophy. I don't know, maybe Professor Balaganapati will enlighten on that. Maybe further.
Now he has to.
Yeah, in fact, that's what I have been arguing, whatever you said, my friend. Philosophy for children is quite popular movement outside India. Unfortunately, in India, we are closing philosophy in the universities even, right? But otherwise, if you look at Australia or somewhere in Europe, philosophy is introduced at the school level itself, because that's how they see the value of philosophy. Unfortunately, we don't see the value of it. And coming back to Professor, your question to Professor Jha is, see, how do you introduce philosophy to an undergrad first year student? Okay, I had a faculty development program 2 weeks back on teaching methodologies in philosophy. So the point is, if you have to introduce it to the entry level students, it is the stories which are more effective. So one of the classroom strategies of introducing philosophy, otherwise you just go to the classroom and talk about metaphysics and epistemology. How does it make any sense to anyone? Because the whole learning process is from known to the unknown. So it has to be a bridge between what you already know to something that you don't know. And that is possible only through narratives. Narrative is the best means of doing it. Right? Thank you.
So
Thank you. I think, Sukalanji, you asked me to speak a sentence. No, you didn't ask me, I just made it up. I just wanted to say, because he said sophistication, that everybody expects it's a sophistication. I mean, goddamn, that Sophia is sophistication. So we have to change the translation of Indian philosophy has to be a different name. You cannot have Sophia and sophistry and then say, no, I won't want to do it. Sorry to steal
okay,
a sentence.
so with that, I'm extremely sorry. I know there are many hands raised. It looks like a yoga class to me, but unfortunately, we cannot entertain any more questions. So let's give a round of applause to the panelists. And we will now break for refreshments outside, and our valedictory session will... Sure.
Friends, I thought this is very important, because we spoke about the future of Indian philosophy, right? who would decide that? And who is going to act according to it? Who is going to decide what should be done tomorrow? It's not that we are sitting here just for the sake of sitting here and leaving this hall with empty hands or empty mind. If you think something can be done for the future of Indian philosophy that each one of us can do individually as well, don't look for the community coming together and trying to do something. What is it? If you can think of, because there are a number of students here, our minds have rotten up, we don't do anything. But at least students who are sitting here, if you think something can be done for the future of Indian philosophy, one small step from your side would definitely make a big impact on the future of Indian philosophy. Please think about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have been told that we are almost ready with the valedictory session straight away in the auditorium. So please proceed to the auditorium where the valedictory session will start very soon.